Hi, I'm Sally Rippin. I'm an Australian children's author and I've just been named the Australian Children's Laureate for 2024 and 2025. This is an absolute career highlight for me. I've been writing for as long as I can remember, published my first book maybe 30 years ago and have over 100 books published since then. I'm also apparently Australia's highest selling female author, which is an incredible thing to think about. But I think probably the most exciting highlight of my career is to be named the Children's Laureate. I'm so excited. What I hope to do is to really promote the idea that there are so many ways to access stories. Obviously through reading, but there are audio versions, there are braille versions, and there are so many different ways to experience storytelling. And these are the things that I feel passionately about. So as a child, we moved around a lot because of my dad's work. So we spent a lot of time in hotel rooms, and my mum would give us books to read, and then when we'd finished reading all the books that we could carry, she'd give us pencils and paper and we'd make our own books. I think that's probably where I started as a children's author. So really, I think I've probably been a writer since I was about 6. So as a child, I'd been to 8 different schools. We grew up all throughout Southeast Asia and arrived in Melbourne at the beginning of year 8. So I finished my schooling and then once again started to travel. So finished studying in China, studied traditional Chinese painting, then came back again to Melbourne where my family was. Even within Melbourne, I found myself moving quite a lot, and most recently have lived in Castlemaine for a while. Now I find myself in North Fitzroy and I love wandering through the Edinburgh Gardens with my dog Billy, who is so patient and has followed me all around Melbourne every time I move house. And he's always the first one to help me unpack my boxes. So thanks, Billy. The first book I had published was a book called Speak Chinese Fang Fang. The initial idea of the book came from a handmade book that I made for a Chinese Australian student I was tutoring. And I showed it to a publisher and she loved it. She loved the idea. So she worked with me to help me make it into a proper book. And I was lucky enough that that particular book won the CBCA Crichton Award of the Year. And that opened up a whole lot of doors for me as an illustrator, which is really how I started in publishing. So I guess even though I mainly write now, I think it was illustration that got me into working in kids' books. And it was a really lovely way to start. Once I'd been writing for a while and I had quite a few books out there, mainly books I'd illustrated, I started to really focus on the kind of books I wanted to write going into the future. And at the same time, my youngest son was really struggling to learn to read. So I looked at the kind of language that was being used in school readers and I thought if I could only come up with really fascinating stories but with that type of language, potentially that would be enough to hook him in. And eventually Billy B. Brown is the series that came out of that. I think Billy's quite relatable. There were a lot of books around at the time she was first published for little girls about princesses and fairies, and I certainly wasn't like that when I was a little girl. So I think a lot of young readers have really appreciated to see a strong, dynamic character. And her best friend Jack is quite sweet and quite sensitive, and I think that's important to show that boys can be that way too. I think a lot of kids can see themselves in Billy and Jack, and that's just such a thrill for me. After writing the Billy and Jack stories, I decided I wanted to write something for an older readership, a more complex story set in an imaginary world. So I came up with 2 characters, they're best friends. There's Polly the witch, and she finds reading a struggle, which means that she messes up her spells. Luckily, she lives next door to Buster, who is a feelings monster, but he has to hide his feelings because of course monsters have to be tough and brave and not afraid of anything. So once I'd written the stories, I did think about having another illustrator on board, but I hadn't actually illustrated anything for a long time. So I thought, no, actually, I think I want to do the characters in this book. One of the loveliest things about being a writer is that I get to work with so many amazing people. So this is in publishing, in marketing, even in the bookstores and the librarians. All of these people work to make sure my books get into the hands of kids. Probably the most exciting part, I would have to say, is seeing my words become alive through the work of an illustrator. So the Billy B. Brown series is illustrated by Aki Fukuoka, and she lives all the way over in New Zealand, but we still have developed a very close relationship. And then Stephanie Spartles illustrated the Hey Jack books. The Big Dog, Little Dog is with Lucinda Gifford, and she does this most beautiful, colourful scenes of the dogs playing together. And another book I've had the chance to work very closely with my collaborator was my co-author, Eliza Hull, and we worked on a book called Come Over to My House, which is illustrated by Daniel Gray Barnett, who lives in Tasmania. Eliza lives in Castlemaine, and we met and we became very good friends when I had a place up there. Eliza lives with a disability, and she showed me how we can make the world much easier for people who live with different types of disabilities.
You know, in Australia alone, 20% of the population have a disability, and yet we just haven't seen representation like this, where we get to meet lots and lots of families that have either a child or both a child and a parent with a disability.
And these are the types of books that we're writing together to introduce readers to seeing the world in a different way, to looking at it in a way that we can make it more accessible for everybody. The School of Monsters series is my newest series, and I'm super excited about it. I love working with Chris Kennett. He's a great illustrator, and we just have so much fun putting these books together. And I see the series as a bridge between a picture book that you would read aloud to a child and potentially the school reader that they will be working on with their teacher at school. So there's a whole lot of little monsters out there. There are more to come, and I think they have been a really good support for lots of young readers around the world now. It's such an honour to be asked to be the Australian Children's Laureate. The Laureate has a long history, and we've had so many incredible people over the last few years act in this position. The Laureate's job is to represent Australian children's literature here in Australia, but also internationally. I think my particular mission as the Laureate is to really remind people that we can access stories in many different ways. So reading is an obvious one, and reading is something that I've always been able to take for granted, I've always found easy, but won't be the case for everybody. So for people who may find reading a struggle, there are many ways we can access stories. So we can access audiobooks, some children might read with Braille, some children might prefer oral storytelling, and there are many ways that we can present stories, whether it's through a long complex novel or through comic books. These are all valid ways to tell stories, and I think it's what I really hope from my 2 years is to open up the idea of how we can all access and share our stories.